welcome everyone. We're excited to be here again for the December edition of the Patch Tuesday support group. My name is Brian Dam. My official title here is Patch Lover Extraordinaire. We're going to, the usual agenda, I'm joined here with Jordan, my good friend and coworker. He's going to lay down the law in terms of this month's releases and the vulnerabilities that we should be or should not be concerned about. Then I'll lay down and talk a little bit about the news in the last month. We had Ignite. There's some kind of exciting stuff that's happened in the last 30 plus days. And then we're joined with our very good friend, Gary Blok, without a C. We apologize for screwing that up. That'll be the first of many screw-ups here in this webinar. And he's going to talk about some of the fun stuff he's been working on recently. And as always, we have Jake Shackelford joining us, looking pretty, and he's going to monitor the chat. So I don't think we're going to use QA from the start. So feel free to start trolling in the chat, and Jake will monitor that and bring up and interrupt with any questions that need to be asked. At the end, as always, we'll have a longer Q&A section where you can ask whatever stump the chump kind of questions you want. So with that said, Jordan.
All right, let's go ahead and jump right on into it. This month had kind of an interesting round of patches. And by interesting, I mean, you know, everybody loves getting fished for Christmas. This round of patches, we had about 59 total updates released from Microsoft. Of those 59 patches, you know, all 50 of them were marked as critical. So, you know, that's a wonderful present in your stocking. 4 of them marked as important, 5 marked as moderate, and there were 43 unique CVEs that came out and about for them. A couple of little interesting things from that. First things first, there were Node.net updates this month, which was kind of weird. Nobody's really figured out why yet, or if that's just, you know, because we don't want any. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, this does happen every once in a while. It's rare, but like if there's legitimately no security vulnerabilities in a given month, like they just don't. I remember, I don't think it's ever happened in I'll say Windows 10 and Server 2019 era, but like there was a time when like Server 2012 went a month without like a security update. It does happen. It's rare.
I mean, it's also the season. They could all be on vacation right now. It's possible.
Maybe there weren't enough people to quality test to ship it out the door or something.
Well, I did see somebody say, because
that's what our job is for, isn't it? As customers.
Right. I mean, Jordan, you and I were talking about this a little earlier. Like it's kind of a light month, and in the sysadmin Patch Tuesday mega thread, somebody was saying, "Oh, maybe I could just skip patches this month." And it was like,
no,
maybe you should
probably not do that.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, in terms of like part of why you probably shouldn't do that, all the hackers are taking the holidays off. We'll come back to that because I've got thoughts on that in a moment here with one of the vulnerabilities that comes along later. So one of the things that was interesting, CVE 2023-24932, kind of hidden away and squirreled away, has some fixes for Boot Manager that start the enforcement process a little bit earlier on. That doesn't get all the way enforced and locked down until February of 2024. That's for Secure Boot. So just something to be aware of and start thinking about, especially for anybody who cares about OSD or anybody who cares about things along the way. I know, I see you smiling down there, Gary.
That's right.
That there are going to be some changes in enforcement for Secure Boot and for Boot Manager coming in February. So start thinking about that now for patches. Another one that was kind of fun because, you know, as we all get ready for the early seasons of Fishmas, I mean, is CVE 2023-35628 at CVE 2023-35628. Basically, this is a remote code execution vulnerability, and it's super awesome and super great. And by super awesome and super great, I mean it leverages the MS-HTML platform so that as you open the preview window of emails in Outlook, it gets to try and make an opportunity to launch a website and launch remote code execution on the machine. It's kind of sort of super not great in that it does not require the user to actually click on a link inside of an email. It just requires them to get the email and open the email, which is, you know, suboptimal. So anybody here who's using Outlook, you should probably care about that because this would be a fantastic opportunity for a attacker to start seeding the ground right before everybody goes away for varying forms of vacation in about 2 to 3 weeks here or 30 days from now. So a lot of the times when you see joyous little vulnerabilities like this show up, the next 30 to 60 days is typically when those start to come online, where people start actively abusing them. So I would not be surprised if we start to see some outcome and fallout from that. One other one that kind of snuck its way in here right before Patch Tuesday, CVE 2023-35618. That's CVE 2023-35618. And that was a critical patch for Edge browser as part of the whole nonsense with Chromium that was going along as well. Again, just another trip down memory lane of don't click things you should know better than to click. The moral of the story for Joy this month with your end users is reminding everybody, please don't click things that you shouldn't click. Please don't click things you shouldn't click, because almost all of the high vulnerability and high risk things involve clicking on something you shouldn't click or opening something you shouldn't open from this month. The other patches and vulnerabilities that are out there are some odd, weird network-focused patches for PEEP, as well as for protection encrypted authentication protocol, which is a network stack trace usually used for Wi-Fi stuff, as well as some other things for servers. And most of them are kind of weird. They need to be inside of your network already problems for most of those. So yeah, they're high up there on the vulnerability list, things like that, but they're kind of really weird edge case networking based attacks still. So the big message this month is don't click. We're back to basics. Don't click on things you shouldn't click on.
So you're saying we're secure as long as we have a highly trained user base that knows not to open random emails?
Yep, and as a result, we're probably
we're fine
totally...
then. I don't see what you're all worried about.
It's fine. Exactly. It's fine.
It sounds like a free day off to me if I click something.
It sounds like we should just send everybody goes home. If we take the email server down, right, and everybody goes home, then there's no risk to the business. Third-party patches from this past month. Patch My PC specific, we released 1,936 updates from November till December 14th. Of those 1,936 updates that got released, 244 unique CVEs. Of those 244 unique CVEs, there were 61 critical ones that were there. And I didn't remember to do the unique for moderate, so I have a wrong number here. But there were, of the 1,936 updates that were released, 1,531 were tied to a moderate, basically, and 8 were tied to a low. Firefox won the award this month with browser with the most number of vulnerabilities, but I'm also going to suspect that's probably due to the highest number of language packs that are out there, coming out at 180. So if you divide by the number of language packs, then you might have a better number there. Google Chrome, there were only 12, Opera 10, and Edge had 12. And again, the mantra of the month as far as patches coming out in your wonderful, joyous browsers is, again, don't click on things you shouldn't click on. There seem to be, for the most part, almost everything is don't go to weird web pages, don't go to bad things. There's been a massive uptick in phishing attempts sending HTML-crafted pages to then abuse those vulnerabilities in browsers, where people are trying to get people to download HTML files to then launch the browser to then open something else.
So again, it seems like we should just stop checking email or using web browsers.
Absolutely. We should just burn the email servers.
And people other mitigation factors come into play here, like the other security tools that would be blocking those sites in the back end. So it's probably not as bad, but still, you shouldn't be clicking.
So it's interesting that you mentioned that. So this is one of the challenges is that what people have started to do is that they've started to actually send the websites as an HTML file to download and click. So the website, you're not actually navigating out to a website anymore. It's literally a file on your machine that gets dropped that then loads the web page inside of your browser to harvest credential tokens.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah. It's an amazing attack vector for it. And it lets them do a lot of really cool crafted components of it because it's all HTML that lives inside of a file on the box. They're not reliant on the external web servers. And as long as they can get you to download the file, so this comes back to that whole like email, we should just, not allow HTML files probably in as attachments on emails anymore. Or really, that might actually be the thing is maybe you should look at adding some transport rules to flag emails that have .html attachments should maybe go to quarantine to get reviewed for a little while at least. So that might actually be probably a good one too. But yeah, absolutely. Like the other half of it, as you mentioned, right? You should have other protections like on the network side of things preventing you from going to the websites.
Yeah, there was this interesting one I saw this month where they're talking about Counter-Strike Source, I think it was. You know what I'm talking about, Jordan? Where like you could actually, I think it was the username you could actually put HTML in the username, and so you could do like an image source tag, like it. And I saw some interesting discussion around there, and it's relevant to this, which is like we have all this as developers, software developers. We have all these frameworks to use. It's actually very easy to write, a couple lines of code, and like suddenly you can just render HTML. It's really easy to do those things, or at least understand it, and that without thinking through, like, well, maybe that's not a good idea. Maybe I don't need to be able to register a person's username as HTML. Like maybe that's bad.
Cool. Over to you, Mr. Bryan.
All right. Okay. Let me share out our screen. Thanks, Jordan. A good month, good heavy month in terms of news. The big one, I think this came just on the heels of our November session. Windows 11 23H2 has been GA'd, I believe. So that's the big news for us to start planning for and looking at. There's some interesting features in here. The big one that I think most people are going to want to either like outright block or at least start playing with is Copilot in Windows. So this was, if you attended, and we'll talk about some Ignite news later, but if you attended or paid any attention to Ignite, it was basically one big show about AI. And so, which for Microsoft is Copilot. And so that's a big one. There's also some interesting features in Windows 11 23H2 that I saw, like they're going further into passwordless. So there's various apps that are no longer going to essentially accept a password and rely on Windows Hello and other technologies. If you're doing any kiosk stuff, it looks like they improved the multi-app kiosk capabilities. I know I played with this in the early Windows 10 days, and you could use provisioning profiles to get a kiosk-like experience in Windows 10. It looks like they've iterated that a little bit for multi-app kiosks. Very specifically, it looked like so you could really lock down to a couple of apps, but still have a workable start menu. Because that was always kind of you either went with there's just no shell, there's no start menu, there's no taskbar. It's just one or two apps, or you have a start menu and it's just locked down and they kind of fail to open or something. So it seems like they've iterated that, which is nice. The other one is Lapse has become native integration, and maybe that's I think that's going to get back ported to some Windows 10 and 11 stuff, but 23H2 is the first one that has it just built in natively. I don't know if you paid any attention to that, Gary. Were you guys looking at 23H2? Anything else that sticks out to you?
No, I mean, for us, we were interested in all the Copilot stuff, and then they released that separate. So
right. So that is generally available. They kind of were releasing it through, I think, the quality update process, and some people were getting it, some people weren't. But 23H2 will have it built in. So that's Windows 11. Let's just talk generally about. There was Matthias. There was Dev Drive, but I didn't look into that. So I can't. Did anyone look into Dev Drive? I didn't.
I can't say I did either.
Fair enough. The other one, Ignite did happen. I'm not going to go through all of the things there. There's a really great. This was released during Ignite. There's a really good. This blog and kind of goes through it in more detail about what they were talking about there. The big things I kind of took away from it was a lot of the things in the suite that have sort of been in private or public preview are supposedly going to get GA'd in February of 2024. So there's a lot of Microsoft made a lot of promises for the February 2024 release of Intune. That includes GAing Enterprise App Management, their third-party patching solution, Advanced Analytics, and Cloud PKI. There might be a couple others there as well, but those are the three that they call out here. And then the other one is they talked a lot about the Copilot for Intune. So they have Copilot Security, which obviously is already out there and you can use it, and is tied to, because it's tied to security, it also involves the configurations you would have in Intune. But this is a separate, specific Copilot for Intune, and that's in private preview right now. And right now, the kinds of things you could do with it is you could tell it, hey, I want to make these changes. What kind of impact is this going to have to my devices? So you're trying to simulate possible changes before you actually go and apply and test them. You could query users or devices. with natural language. So you could, the demo I saw was things like, hey, Jordan's reporting that his computer, this such and such name is running slow. Why do you think that is? And it would look at all of the data it has and try to give you some suggestions. The other thing is you could ask it for suggestions, like just blanket, like what should I be doing better? What policies am I missing? And it will try and take a holistic view of what you've configured within Intune and give you some suggestions for improvements. When we get into Intune proper, that was all Ignite. There's some, I just looked at the release notes. This isn't comprehensive, but some stuff that stood out for me is specifically that we have a broadened capability for Mac app management. Specifically, we can have unmanaged PKG apps set up to Mac OS. And I think this has been a big hurdle for people. I think that's probably one of the most, in my experience, was one of the more common app packages type. So it's good that we can finally deploy those via Intune. You also have, if you're using MAM support at all within Intune, that made it for GCC and GCC High. I don't know if we have any three-lettered agencies on this call, but hello, you can now use MAM for Windows, specifically MAM for Windows. They also added some settings in the setting catalog for WSL or Windows Subsystem for Linux. I don't know that that's used heavily in enterprise. I know as a developer, there we go. We do have a GCC here. So great. But they have added some configuration for WSL. So if you have developers, you have some developers using WSL, you can now configure that for them. And the other one that I just caught about, and I don't know if this is actually in a What's News, but I just saw that they have officially embiggened the Win32 apps default size from 8 to 30. Now let the docs say 30. It might be 32. I'm a little confused.
32, I think, is what they were leaning for.
That's what I mean. But the actual docs said like 30, which just feels so weird. But anyone who's done any large apps, CAD, and some others have come across this, and before you could contact support, and they could bump your specific tenant up. It's apparent that has now just become the default, which is good for us, because we have plenty of customers that have run up against that, and it's just kind of a pain. So the default.
Hopefully, they do policy size next on top of that.
Yeah, yeah. We run into policy size issues, specifically, right? If you deploy like too many applications, like if you deploy hundreds and hundreds of applications, which is a thing we try and make easy for you, you can run up against policy size. Yes. More generally, we're talking about the Mac things. It just feels this goes into pre-Ignite and Ignite a little bit. Like what I'm hearing out of Microsoft a little bit is that they really want to kind of go after a Mac management. That they've known it's been a hole, and there seems to be some meaningful resources applied in that direction. Like it just feels like they really want to take on Jamf if they can. My sort of take, and I have some friends that are big Mac fans. It's like, if you have a handful of Mac devices, you might be using Intune or Workspace ONE or something else. But if you have a heavy Mac heavy environment, you're probably going to go bust out Jamf and use it there. And it feels like Microsoft is going to try and make a play there. Will they succeed? Will they actually execute? I can't tell you. But I can just say that they're talking about it a lot more than they have in the past. And so it's worth watching out. For those of you still on, still using ConfigMgr, there was a release. Again, this kind of happened just after became GA shortly after our November session. I will say I've heard more than any other version upgrade issues.
Oh my goodness! Goodness! Let me tell you. Oh my goodness!
Yeah, we may have how many?
We had fun.
Distinct environments. How many distinct environments do we have?
We have. Let's see. We have 39
labs and 4 different demos.
Yeah. So 30, 36. A few. 36. Yeah.
And like, what was our failure count?
I think 12. It was like 10 or so failed. Yeah.
2, 4. It was 8. I think failed. No, plus you had the others that failed in demo lab that failed on the first attempt.
Every single one of them, I might add. But yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Like it was It was bad. And this had nothing to do, like, this was even after installing ODBC driver. This was even after, like, you know, rebooting it and everything like that. It went all the way through. We don't have Pixie set up in those labs, so I can't tell for sure on that one, Chris Thomas. But like a lot of the times, and it was a weird failure spot too. It was failing like after the SQL upgrade, and it would get to like install files for the WMI provider, and then would just and then fall over.
You too, Gary?
Yeah, my lab totally fell over, so I ended up reverting to a backup from June, getting that fully updated and made sure everything was pristine. Ran the upgrade and it died at the same spot, like right at the end. It was just weird.
Yep. Yeah. It was consistently the spot that we saw them fail was install files step afterwards when it does the install files addition to the WMI provider. Like just
yeah. So again, I bring it up this issue because any of us who've been using ConfigMgr in the last several years, this has been a very rock solid part of it. And so this sticks out so much for us. I saw the question, right? Is there anything that we know practically to avoid this issue? I don't know. I think that is sort of fluid.
We tried a couple different approaches, multiple different ways, and we still ran into the same issues. So I don't know if we have any like proactive advice there.
Yeah.
I think the one thing I will definitely say is, one, make sure that after you install the ODBC driver, make sure you reboot, because if you don't reboot after it, you will fail a prereq check because you have a pending restart. Even though ODBC doesn't call for the reboot, it doesn't tell you that it needs to reboot. Once you install it, you just click next, and it's like, oh yeah, everything's fine. It's not fine.
You don't check that box to skip prereq checks? You just
definitely don't do that on this time around. The other thing that I would say that we noticed, and this is kind of weird, was I think we had a better overall success rate on the machines we updated Windows after we did the 2309 upgrade.
Okay.
And I'm not convinced, because technically speaking, what it could be, I'm not convinced of it. What it could be is that lab, because those labs only get updated once a quarter, basically, because of the fact that there are demo environments for it, is that maybe it is an artifact of Kerberos hardening.
Right.
And so what might be the case for anybody who has environments that are out of date, if you're even a couple of months out of date on patches, you may want to update, wait a month, and then apply it to make sure that you've had time for tickets to cycle, or forcibly cycle your tickets. If you have an environment where you can tolerate a forcible ticket cycle.
When you say tickets, explain tickets. I know what you're talking about. But.
Yeah, so not just like reboot the server. I mean, do what's called a K-list kill. So machines basically have a ticket that they use to go off and authenticate to Active Directory. They have a ticket that they use to authenticate to talk to themselves, and it's Kerberos. It's basically, this is who I am, this is how I identify myself, this is how I'm going to interact with the rest of the world, and how I authenticate and validate who I am and what I'm allowed to do. And there was a series of hardening patches that have been being released over time that can bite you. And we've seen an RPC error that's been coming in as a number of support cases for things where outside sources for stuff was breaking. And so it's possible, maybe, that if you're doing the patch, that if the ticket hasn't been refreshed, that it isn't able to talk to itself to update its WMI provider in that scenario. So if you update it and it's hardened, right? And the tickets haven't been refreshed for the hardening for it, that maybe that's why it's failing to get permissions to install it. I don't know, but maybe, and I didn't think about this until like a week after we ran into all the problems. It was one of those like, oh yeah, maybe that was the issue. Was that maybe if you did a K-list kill and forced your tickets to refresh along the way, which that has its own caveats. Don't just go running off and run K-list kill, please. Don't just go running off and refreshing your golden ticket across to all of your domain controllers twice. Please, go read the directions on why and how to do that and what scenarios and what problems there are first. But it could just be that as simple as making sure that everything is patched and letting it bake for a couple of weeks to ensure that tickets are good could fix the problem for it. So it could just be that because of when 2309 came out and when the final step of patches for it came out, that maybe that's what got our particular environment. But I don't know, Gary, maybe it's the same thing for you, for your lab, because if you've got that, if you're not doing it every single month because it's a lab.
The key takeaway here is this is abnormally bad. And I've heard that from many sources. So again, most of us have been lulled into this sense of security that, hey, this is a non-event. You're going to go push this button, go grab a coffee, or go get lunch or whatever, and come back, and everything will be fine. And it just seems like that is not the case this time. We alluded to it, but I want to specifically call it out. There are two prereqs here. You do need to install an ODBC driver, 18.1 or greater. This is talked about in the what's new. It's here, it's listed, but you absolutely do have to do those things. To Jordan's point, you probably want to reboot after that. If you have any resource access policies, which I don't know that a lot of people use, but like it's a thing, you have to, again, the docs call this out, you do have to remove those. Otherwise, it will flag you in the upgrade warning. And then post-upgrade, they recommend that you go ahead and reconfigure your CMG if you have one. And that is really just the way that they've done security. The ConfigMgr team has had kind of a back-end internal shortcut to register Azure, things in Azure, and they are killing that bit. And so you have to go do it in the more normal process of creating a what the word escapes me, Jordan and Jake, an Azure app registration, I think it is. Yeah. And so, so again, this is
app registration for CMG thing.
Yeah. So that's, again, it's in the docs prepared, and I haven't confirmed that like your CMG isn't going to stop working, but it's worth noting. So now, what do we actually get out of this thing? What are the new features? The ones that there's a more comprehensive list here, of course. The ones that stand out to me is we've been promised this for a long time, that the Windows update user experience, that ConfigMgr can just now use the native experience in Windows 11 and I think Windows 10. This has been a long ask, and so I'm excited to finally see that in there. You can create policies for changing editions. So if you need to change devices between education and an enterprise and all of those things, there's actual just policies in ConfigMgr to do that now. You also have a Windows 11 upgrade readiness dashboard. Feels like that's a bit late in the game, but it's there. I will tell you again, anecdotally, I've heard from people that they've had difficulties getting it to work, where there's no data, or I've actually heard some people just outright say, "Oh, that crashed the console," or just doesn't load. So again, it's exciting, but also like, okay, maybe it's not quite there yet. Just a couple more things to go, and then I'm done here. If anyone is using Azure Automation Update Management, and I have to say that very specifically, Azure's Automations Update Management, that is being officially deprecated here in August of 2024. And the reason for that is primarily that the log analytics agent, or the MMA, that is being deprecated, and that's what Azure Automation Update Management was built upon. And so, essentially their dependency is dying, and they're going to kill it. They're replacing it with Azure Update Manager, which is for the most part on par with the update management, except for anyone who has on-prem servers. A big change between these two solutions is that the new Azure Update Manager, and again, I know the language here is difficult. You had Azure Automation Update Management, and now we have Azure Update Manager. These are separate, unrelated technologies. The key thing is that the new one requires that your servers are in Azure Arc. And so if you have on-prem servers, they must be connected to Azure Arc in order to have their updates managed by the system, which is going to cost you up to $5 a month. I think if you have some Defender P2 or something like that, that's included. But if you are currently using the free Azure Automation Update Management to patch your on-prem servers, you want to pay attention to this doc and come up with a plan for what's going to happen in later on this year. And then the last thing is a quick one. PowerShell 7.4 hit GA. So if you are a huge PowerShell fan or nerd, you can go read the what's new and get all excited.
Hey.
All right.
There's one more here,
okay.
Brian.
Yes.
Gary wanted to share. I'm going to throw it in the chat.
Okay. Here, I'll click on it.
I was curious, Brian, if you'd heard anything, like if you take this is about, managing drivers and firmware in Intune. If you want to scroll down to the bottom, it tells us a bunch of things that are coming this year. And I was like, well, it's about the end of the year. Have you heard any of those things, if they're coming?
So the big, like one of the big asks is number one here. So sorry, just to be clear, we're going over to Windows Update for Business, the deployment service, rolled out controlling drivers, and then Intune is the first-party front end for that feature. So you can now manage drivers and firmware within Intune. And the first problem with that is this number one, which is Intune will tell you, hey, there's 10 devices that need this driver, but there's no way to figure out what those drivers are. So that's a huge problem. The other one is it's all very, if you either do it automatic, you either YOLO it, or you do it manual, and there's no in between. There's no like just updating all of these 10 things. And then the other one is that we're all kind of used to managing drivers based on model, right? Like this is, if you've attended anything Johan's ever talked about, like, like he's going to the total control method for drivers. This idea that, I have a ZBook G4, and there's a very specific set of drivers that are going to go for those things. Yes, I think that they are not going to hit this year, but I do think we'll see specifically that first one. I've seen a demo of this already, seeing all devices for which the driver is applicable. I've seen that live code, I believe. Part of this is going where I'm a little confused is that there's also been kind of a rebrand and reorg that everything's auto patch now. And so like, I know that I know the team, some of the people on the team working on this, but they're going through a bit of a rebrand and reorg. And I don't know how much that impacts their timelines. But in some of the Ignite or some of the tech takeoff sessions, I think they actually demoed some of these things. So no, I don't think any of this is coming this year. I do think you're going to see it early 2024 though.
Thanks, Brian. I was just curious because I've been waiting on a few of these before I jump on that train.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, there's been a real blocker for some people. Like it's just, you are going to, because you're sort of forced to deploy this update or this driver, but you really don't know what it's going to hit. Like you don't really have that visibility, and that's not, that's not great. So with that, I hand it over to Gary. Thank you for joining us. I'll stop sharing my screen. And I'm not even 100% sure what Gary's going to talk about, but I do know it'll be awesome. So with that, I hand it over.
Hi, thanks, Brian. I thought I'd first just kind of mention like my new roles. Like everybody basically knows me as like working for Wells Fargo and doing a lot of the task sequence stuff with Mike Terrell. That was kind of my pull into the spotlight for a while, and so that's kind of just how I've been known. But now I'm a year and a half at HP already, and a lot of people are like, "What do you do there?" And I'm like, "That's a great question." So I'm actually an engineer in the managed service areas, so not something you'd probably like think of HP for doing, because like when you think HP, you think, "Oh, awesome devices." Right? Awesome devices.
Great printers. Yeah.
Yes. Which I have no affiliation with. But so I'm in the managed service area, and I get to help come up with ideas for how we can come in and help you to manage your endpoints. Basically, today we have 3 big services in my team. One is like the full endpoint management, where you're a company, you're a startup, you whatever, and you want someone to deal with it and not yourselves. We'll come in and run your Intune CM, whatever, to our specifications. We also have a Sure Recover managed service. So this is built into most HP enterprise classes. You can hit F11 and it boots right to the cloud and will pull down a Windows image. And our service, then you can customize that image so you can run, you can add different things in. So think of like OSD Builder, we maintain that image for you, keep it updated constantly. So if anytime your user in the field needs to re-image, F11, new image comes down and you're ready to autopilot back into your environment. And then the last thing that I'm mostly responsible for is what we call the Intelligent Update Service, which is just a fancy name for we'll manage your drivers and BIOS for you. It's a big pain point I've found for a lot of customers, even with like today's Intune, they still want more control and they want rings Now, I know Intune's working on that, which is another reason I kind of brought it up. I was just curious if you've heard any movement on that, because that was one thing that we were thinking about using to manage our service was just using Intune, but it's not to that point yet. So our service is, it's a ring approach. You'd have your ring set up. You'd use the exact same groups you use in CM or Intune. And then we would manage which updates are coming down to those rings. So that's the big one that I'm responsible for today, using our tools to manage your drivers. So
I want to back up, Gary. Gary. You actually know what you do at your job now? Because I'm still working on that. I've been here like 6+ months. You actually figured it out?
Yeah, yeah. So I do that, and then I also do a lot of other stuff that is not part of my job description, just because I want to, and no one's gotten mad at me yet. So I spend a lot of time just hanging around on social and trying to help people there as well. I've actually been pulled into a lot of customer calls just because they're like, "Oh, hey, Gary works at HP. We're using something that he did on his blog 4 years ago. Can you just pull him into our call?" And they're like, "Who's this Gary guy?" Because like apparently even the TCs or the technical consultants don't know. Anyway, so I get to meet a lot of really fun people that work at HP because I did stuff to help them when I didn't work at HP. But anyway, so that's not my job responsibility, but I do enjoy helping people. So I end up doing that from time to time. We have, HP has like the technical consultants for different areas that are supposed to do that. But they'll hit me up from time to time. But like what I've been doing for fun lately is I've been just doing fun task sequence stuff. Like I'll monitor the Reddit, Discord, and when people are like, "Hey, I'm trying to do this," and I'm like, "That's kind of interesting." So I'll just go in my lab for a couple hours, pound something out, and then I'll blog it, throw it up there, and then I'll like post a link into Reddit or whatever. Just because like I still love task sequences. Like they're so amazing. You can do so much in a task sequence, and they're not going away. I did like so before I started doing this again, like I threw it on Twitter, like, "Hey, do people still want this kind of content?" And it was like a pretty resounding yes. A lot of people are like, as much as like they're doing co-management or even moving to the cloud, they're like, "We're always going to have stuff that we can't do through Intune, and we always want this bare metal thing, or even if we're doing it Intune, like where we bare metal it to a point for Intune." So they're keeping up with the task sequences. So I was like, all right, that's enough for me to keep doing my hobby on the side of managing my lab and doing task sequence stuff. So like personally, almost all my devices are out of my CM lab and over to my Intune lab. But with OSD, it goes back and forth pretty quick. So, and that's what I like doing. So that's one thing I've been doing. So once again, if you have task sequence questions, feel free to hit me up on Twitter and I'll think about it. And if I've got free time at night after all the kids are in bed, I don't mind hammering some of that stuff out because I find it fun. I'll stop for questions.
I just want to tell you, Gary, task sequences, I love seeing you just drunk on power. It's a beautiful look.
There's a chat in here or a question in the chat here too from Mark asking if you're in the WinAdmins Discord, Gary.
Yeah, so Discord kind of scared me for a while because it just seemed like overwhelming. And then MMS forced me to get into Discord. So you can thank Brian Mason in that group for that. And then once I was over there, it's like, it's not as scary as I thought it would be. Like most people are normal. But no, I find it fun. So if you talk about HP, I do searches for like keywords like HP or other things. So I will find you and I will make it awkward for you if you say something negative about where I work and some processes. But mostly I just want to like see if I can help you. Like if you're complaining, like odds are good, I might have an idea for you. So I do like to stalk people who drop HP in Discord. Other things I've been doing a lot lately is OSD Cloud. Everybody's familiar with that amazing product from David. About a year ago, David let me have control of the code. I'm not sure how wise that was. But I've been really enjoying so the advent of code is happening right now. There's some people doing that. And so for me, instead of doing advent of code, I thought I'd do advent of OSD cloud and like try to backwards engineer some of the stuff David's done. I've learned a ton, and then I was able to add the 23H2 support because the way David was doing it before, those aren't available. So basically, I backwards engineered the media creation tool that Microsoft puts out, and I was able to pull out all the URLs out of that tool. And then, so OSD Cloud is now using that for the catalog instead of WSUS for the catalog of ESD files.
Nice.
Yeah, so that was a lot of fun, like figuring out how to do all that and everything. Like if anybody's curious, it's all out on GitHub. I explained exactly like which DLLs I had to go into to like pull out that information. Some people wanted to use Fiddler, and I'm like, well, I just don't really understand Fiddler either. So I just broke open the DLLs and found the information. And
well, they're also asking Gary, are you planning on updating his documentation too?
You know, as a developer, which I'm not, a scripter, it's way more fun just to build. But I eventually, once I get things to the point where I'm happy, I will do some documentation update. A lot of stuff that I did for OSD Cloud to start with before I did this thing was make a lot of enhancements for HP. So like, and none of that's public yet. So like, it's not in the GUI or anything like that. But if you like preset a bunch of variables before you kick off OSD Cloud, it'll run our tools. It will install your BIOS updates. It will update your TPM chips. It will run the HPIA, all as part of the process during setup complete phase of the Windows OS install. Yeah, so that was a lot of stuff I really wanted to figure out. Like in a task sequence, it's easy because you just make a step and you add whatever you want. Trying to do it through actually the Windows process gets a little more complicated. Now, knowing OSD through ConfigMgr really allowed me to have a deeper understanding of how the OS gets installed. So that knowledge was very helpful. But yeah, so setup complete is the stage I do a lot of the stuff in. The only thing I don't like about using setup complete is it's behind that hidden wheel of just a minute. So like that just a minute takes like 20 minutes instead of like 1 or 2 minutes like it would normally happen because you're running all these processes in the background. Yeah, so that's another thing that I've been doing for fun. And then I just wanted to give myself another little shameless plug for needing help with the Safeguard hold database I built. So last year when 22H2 came out, there was a lot of Safeguard holds. And I was like, how do I get this information? And at the time, I didn't have access to enough computers in Intune to like provide any of that data through the reports that they provide. So then using something Adam Gross had started with his FU thing. Sorry, it's always just funny when, anyway, Adam's funny. I took that and went another step further to like accumulate a bunch of data from machines to build a Safeguard database. And I've got that out in my GitHub. And I was gonna.
I just linked it to you. I just linked it in the chat.
Nice. Yeah. So like I've got a couple samples. You can just copy the code right into your ISE, whether it's PowerShell ISE or Visual Code for the cool people. You can then run that and you can pop in your ID and it will tell you information. And I also have instructions like how you can build your own database. So basically if people have information when they look at my stuff on GitHub that they have new numbers that I don't have, I'll take them and add it to mine just to keep a central repository. But I built that a year ago, and a lot of stuff I build is just because I'm curious and it's how I learn. Like taking a class doesn't really help me. Like that's not how my brain works. It's got to be like building things that I can actually use. So that's, yeah. Also, just a plug for Via Monstra, because that's how I got started in all of this. Johan, if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be doing half the stuff I am today. So quick little plug there, because he made it like applicable to work. So
I just love it. I love it. Thanks, Gary. And with that, I bid you adieu. Have a great week, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
So you just told like 200 plus people that if they use HP, they can make a support call and get you to help
That's
them.
what I heard.
Yeah, that's what I'm hearing here.